In this video, I'll do a very brief basics of app-v troubleshooting. Now, troubleshooting issues with an app-v application is somewhat similar to troubleshooting just a regular Windows application that's locally installed on a machine. I guess the only extra element is that you will need to get into the virtual environment that the application lives in to actually tweak the file system and the registry to try and get it to work. To do this, there's a couple of ways you can actually get into the virtual environment. The way I suggest, or the way I like, is open your OSD file, and I'll stick it in between the dependency tag and what I'm putting in here is a little prescript. So the script event is launch and the timing is pre, indicating that this script will execute before the application is launched. Timeout is equal to 0, so the script should never time out. It's going to be allowed to run. Protect equals true, so it's going to run within the virtual environment. So basically what we're trying to accomplish here is we're trying to launch a command.exe, a command prompt window, in the virtual environment. That way we can see the files and we can see the virtual registry belonging to our virtualized application. Okay, once we have our prescript entered correctly, as you can see here, we should be ready to launch the application. Now, you can double click this to launch, as long as you've set the registry as we did in a previous video. The registry you set is HK local machine, software, Microsoft, SoftGrid, permissions, and you want to allow for the add permission. So you set that to value of .1. And there we have it. We've got a command prompt which should be launched in our virtual environment. We will verify this by trying to browse to the Q drive, which is our virtual drive, if you can remember that. Okay, it looks good, so we should be able to see our virtual directory, which we can, which is Orca. So that and into our VFS, or we could just go to the main folder. And there. So you can see here that we do have access and we can see into the virtual environment. Now, why would you require this? If you have an application that isn't working and perhaps it's missing files and you've got a hunch, maybe you look back at your installation report and say, hey, I'm missing these files. So maybe what you could do is do a file copy from this command line, since you'll have access into the virtual environment, and then test by just launching the orca.exe from the command line. It's a good test. You could run a tool like Procmon, which is a Microsoft System internal tool which monitors processes. You can browse to the registry by going to regedit.exe and see your virtual registry and modify that. This is basically your window in to your application in the virtual environment. So after that fact, troubleshooting is very similar. Now keep in mind, you'll have to manage the cache, because app-v applications cache the machine. So if you clear the cache, the changes you made will have been cleared as well, so your application isn't fixed. You'll need to go and modify the application through the sequencer again. I'm going to post some useful links, like the app-v troubleshooting checklist and other materials for helping you remediate broken AppV sequence applications. For now, just what I wanted to show you is how you get in here. There's also a command for getting in to the virtual environment, which is by using the sft-tray.exe, which is in the install directory for Microsoft Application Virtualization Client. And you just pass a command of /exe space cmd.exe space double quotes and the name of your OSD here for your application, and it should launch your application with the command prompt. I like to actually create an OSD myself, just because I find it very useful for going in and out as I see fit. I don't have to go and keep entering a command, whereas the other way seems to have some issues sometimes when I use procmon. I hope you found this useful. So, in my tips and tricks, firstly, as you would have seen if you have viewed my setup videos, you'll have noticed I set up a variable on the client machines. It was sft_softgrid server. Then, when sequencing my applications, my deployment tab contained that variable as the hostname. I strongly suggest doing this as it future-proofs your setup. So if your server ever needs to be decommissioned or moved, you can just change the environment variable on your users' machines to point to the new server. Application compatibility. First thing I'd like to address with application compatibility is the fact that AppV in itself is not an application compatibility fix. It seems to be a common misconception that if an application doesn't work on your, say, Windows 7 64-bit machine when it's locally installed, that virtualizing the application in AppV and streaming it to the user's machine will fix the issue. It will not. AppV provides isolation and other key benefits. However, it does not get around any application compatibility issues. Also, AppV has limitations itself, such as you can't virtualize drivers, you shouldn't virtualize COM+, you shouldn't virtualize any boot time services. With that in mind, and tying in with their application compatibility, there are tools out there by Citrix and Quest, Citrix AppDNA and Quest ChangeBase, that allows you to analyze your portfolio of applications, and it will report back on what applications can and cannot be sequenced or virtualized. Those tools actually will also report on compatibility issues with Windows 7, with 64-bit, and with server. They're really powerful tools, and if you can at all, I suggest you having a look at them. Now, also with that in mind, my next tip would be to strategize. So, you could seemingly virtualize about 70 to 80% of all your applications. But do you want to do this? Sometimes it might make sense to keep an application locally installed and have it as part of your image if it's what we'd call a core application. I would not sequence core applications. I would ensure they're on the image and delivered on the image. If you're using Citrix XenApp, perhaps using the web interface, and you're also using just the AppV client on the desktops, perhaps in some instances where your users work remotely and require access to a backend for some applications, those would be ideal candidates for hosting in the Citrix web interface. The users could just go to the web interface and use them and always have connectivity to the backend. as the applications will be hosted on a Citrix Turbo server. As there's so much you could think of to strategize applications. You should also rationalize, obviously, your applications if you're planning a migration, because it's possible that you may not be moving all your applications to the new platform. AppV tools. Now we went through the core components, being the sequencer, the management server, and also the client. But Microsoft actually has some other AppV tools that can be freely downloaded from their website, such as the dynamic suiting composition tool, which gives you a nice little user interface to link multiple applications together. There's also a dashboard for SharePoint, so you can generate your AppV reports from your SQL database through your management console, and those can be published to your SharePoint site if you have SharePoint in your environment. I'd like to also recommend some useful websites. Firstly, the Microsoft AppV TechNet forums. So this website is rapidly growing in popularity, with more and more users starting to use AppV in their environment. There's a lot of contribution there. So if you ever have an issue, that should really be your first stop to try and get around those issues or find some answers. There's also the AppVert Guru site, which also covers some AppV forms. It's also useful for other virtualization technologies which you may or may not use, such as VMware ThinApp, Citrix ZenApp. I also like to give a cheap plug to my own website, www.roryman.com. It's mostly AppV stuff I've got up there, but I also do other desktop engineering type work with numerous different technologies. So, please feel free to give me a few extra hits. The AppV user group Ireland is a little group I've set up just for Irish specific users. Don't even have to be Irish. If you'd like to contribute to the actual group, please feel free to join. We're aiming at doing some knowledge sharing. And it would be great if we got enough demand to possibly do a session and perhaps meet up or do something online. So please check out those websites. With all that said, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope all of my videos have proven somewhat useful to you, and